Well, let's continue the conversation with our political observers. Susan Smith is principal with Blue Sky Strategy Group. Tim Powers is chairman of the SUMA Group, and Anne McGrath is the national director for the NDP. Hello to the three of you.
Hello.
So we just spoke to Danielle Smith, and as you know, she is engaging in this campaign, pushing back on the federal government's proposed electricity regulations. She says the environment minister is being too ideological, especially given the fact that their own electricity supplier says that if they meet these regulations, the province is going to have a hard time meeting electricity demands. Is Ottawa being too hardlined here, Susan?
I think the accusation of being hardline coming out of Danielle Smith's mouth is always something that's cause for a little side smirk, at least, from people. The federal government has been clear about what it wants to do in terms of net zero grids. It's something I think people understand across the country. I think Danielle Smith, with an $8 million campaign, a marketing campaign in Alberta, Ontario, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, is going to cause more head scratching than anything else. And I think it's a deflection. From her perspective, she's trying to get people off the failed sort of CPP conversation, and she's spending her money in other places. She is a hard line. She takes a hard line on things, but I'm not sure it's going to resonate with people outside the province of Alberta.
Okay, not outside the province of Alberta maybe, but you know, within the province, as I say, it is the electricity supply company or regulator that says if they're going to have a hard time meeting supply if they follow through. Tim, what do you think? Is Ottawa being too hardlined?
Well, there's certainly a message in the province that she's going to that resonates, and going to and spending the money in about Guilbeault being hardlined. I mean, we've heard the Ontario Premier speak about that before. Certainly in the East Coast, there's a sense that Minister Guilbeault doesn't necessarily understand rural sensitivities and the like. So there's part of an audience there. But I do agree with Susan that this is a bit of a distraction from some of her other challenges. Anne knows she was in Alberta politics for a while. Often Alberta premiers, more often Conservative Alberta premiers, will go on the road and say Ottawa sucks and hope that that engenders them at home. I don't know if this campaign is going to make any significant difference. The only thing it may do is encourage Ontario, New Brunswick, and maybe one or two others to come in on Justin Trudeau a little harder on the issue of affordability. And because the Liberals are suffering at the polls because they're not seen to be connecting with Canadians on that issue, maybe it creates some space elsewhere, but not necessarily on these regulations.
Yeah, I was actually wondering about that, Anne, because, you know, as Tim talks about affordability, I think whenever these debates happen, people are thinking dollars and cents. How much is it going to cost me? If you're going to be net zero in 12 years' time, what does that actually mean on my electricity bill? Is there an opportunity for Danielle Smith and her message to permeate beyond Alberta, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that she is definitely picking a fight with Ottawa, and it is, Tim's right, it's a tried and true thing in Alberta to pick fights with the federal government and with Ottawa. However, she's making some mistakes in my view. She is, first of all, she's fighting at least a two-front war. Like, she's got two things going on, both of which are fights with Ottawa, but also potentially fights with other premiers and other provinces. So, for instance, on CPP, to go out there and say, you know, that over half of the CPP is Alberta's. Number one, it's factually incorrect, but also that terrifies people in other provinces about what she's planning to do. And so I think that it terrifies Albertans, but it also terrifies the rest of the country. And on the targets, I find it odd that she would be like doing these kind of really doom and gloom kind of advertising. Like, I mean, we just saw Heather Stephenson try that in Manitoba. These kinds of ads that are designed to scare people, that are factually probably incorrect to a large extent. And really, I think what people want in Alberta would like to see her do is focus on how to meet those targets and still protect Albertans' jobs.
I think they'd also like the Premier to focus on healthcare, on the opioid crisis, on housing, and she's taking $8 million away from those kinds of buckets, and she's spending them on a social media campaign in other provinces, and it doesn't have a direct impact on her own citizens. So I think this one could backfire. It's a bit of like Charlie Brown's teacher. You know, I think there's a bit of wah-wah on this, and I'm not sure it's really going to matter that much.
Well, except that here you have Danielle Smith saying already that she has her people looking into perhaps invoking Alberta Sovereignty Act Act in order to forego these regulations. How worried should Ottawa be about that? Because that's quite a constitutional trigger.
Ottawa should be worried about the fact that this is post-election campaign and not pre-election campaign, because she presented very differently in the lead up to the campaign. And this is exactly the people who were worried about her and might have thought, okay, she's being reasonable, she's being calm, she's communicating well, blah, blah, blah. Now they see what she's doing. I think that there's going to be a lot of buyer's remorse.
She's setting herself up as a convenient foil for the Prime Minister, right? The Prime Minister doesn't have to try that hard to present a reasonable alternative to the kind of Alberta that Danielle Smith is selling. Now, it may not play that well for him for too many more Alberta votes, who knows, but it actually gives him an opportunity in the rest of the country to boost Canada in the face of something that's a bit confusing, controversial, and maybe slightly strange or misplaced for the rest of Canadians.
Yeah, just quickly picking up off that, I mean, it was alluded to by Anne a little while ago. She's got to give something to the other premiers if she wants to build some allyship. And she doesn't really have any allyship. She certainly doesn't have it with Ottawa. That is her point of attack. You saw when she did come out with the CPP reform, different premiers, including mine in Newfoundland and Labrador, saying, hey, wait now, we've got some issues here. Doug Ford, even Scott Moe didn't run to the front of the line and say, yeah, we're with you, Danielle Smith. So if you're going to do something and you're trying to actually extract policy as opposed to just pick a fight as a diversion, you need allies. Not sure where she's going to get them with so many mixed initiatives.
Mm-hmm. And prior to the election date, they were really working hard to try and calm people down because people had a lot of fears about her, and now those are being realized.
Okay, well, we'll watch how that makes its way through. But you mentioned the election campaign, and of course, Rachel Notley of the NDP, very much looked at as possible contender, possible premier, in what turned out to be a very close vote going up to election night. We just saw Wap Kinew elected this week in Manitoba, and of course, there's the NDP already in government in British Columbia. Your party's convention is coming up next week at the National Convention in Hamilton, Ontario. I'll see you there. What does Wap Kinew's victory and really the trend line that we've seen for the NDP out west, what does it say, do you think, about the future of the party?
Well, I think it's very promising. I think with respect to the convention itself, it will definitely put a spring in the delegates' steps. Like that, they will be very excited and very happy. I certainly remember what happened in 2015 when Rachel Notley won in Alberta. There is and as we watched the last couple of campaigns in British Columbia with the NDP being elected and then re-elected, that really gives people a lot of energy, gives people a lot of hope. But I think the most important thing in all of this, I took from Premier-elect Kinew's address on election night, which I was very impressed by a number of things in his speech. But one of the things I thought that was most important was that he did not talk about this as a victory for the NDP. Mm-hmm. He talked about this as a victory for Manitobans. And I think that his approach of like governing for the whole province, putting healthcare at the front of his agenda because that's the issue that most people care about, and it's something that really needs fixing. I think, and then just the way he talked and how he talked about it, I thought was very it was very embracing of the whole population.
Yeah, well, we were there actually in NDP headquarters that night at the Fort Garry Hotel, and without a doubt, a lot of energy in the room. What impact do you think this has on party fortunes?
On NDP party fortunes? I don't know. I mean, like Anne said, I expect all the delegates in Hamilton to come, pretty charged up. It's a big deal to defeat an incumbent premier, I think, in a government that had been there for a while, the Conservative government. I think people always look at the NDP in the lead up to elections federally. I think they make different choices when it comes down to it's more of a binary choice, A or B, when it comes to election day. I mean, parts of the country, BC and others, have often and always frequently go NDP. But I think in the lead up to the federal election, it still is a Trudeau Poilievre, what's that guy's name again? Poilievre fight. My congratulations sincerely to Premier-elect Kinew. I think it's phenomenal. The first First Nations Premier for Manitoba, first Nations Premier in the country, I believe, yeah. And I think he set the tone.
Level, yes.
Yeah, at the provincial level. He set the tone by talking about kitchen table issues for Canadians, and I think that's what's going to be important for every single party in the election. And all parties' fortunes will depend on how they connect with people at the kitchen table.
Tim, last word to you quickly.
Quickly. Okay, Michael, being Russia,
don't
just
love
ate
you.
it up. Well, I would just say this, the more significant NDP victory in the last little while was the one Anne was involved with Rachel Notley. That's not to take away from what Premier-elect Canoe has achieved, and you have to admire him as an individual and the struggles he overcame. But there is a history in Saskatchewan, long-held history of electing NDP premiers. I think there are some lessons for the national scope of politics here, but I think it was also a repudiation of the Palliser years and the poor campaign run by the Conservatives. So I'm not sure Anne or anybody else is ready to declare the second orange wave is breaking.
Okay, well, Anne, I look forward to that if you're going to ever do that. Please do so on our show. But for now, Susan, Tim, Anne, thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.